I'm waiting for him to point at me. True, Bev, thank you. So while the video is getting going, thank you for being here for this report. Thank you for supporting our two delegates, Bob Gross and Catherine Haff. And Bob is not able to be here this morning, so Catherine will be bringing the delegate report. Bev is going to bring a short bit of information on the gun violence prevention that On Earth Peace sponsored. And you know, it's just a lovely thing to have the moderator, now the ex-moderator, the former moderator. And so I'm hoping that Tim will bring some personal reflections on annual conference. How many people here were at Cincinnati annual conference? Okay, very good. And on a different topic, how many of you are going to NOAC in a month? Okay, great. Sorry, that was a diversion. Bev, I'm going to give it to you.
Okay. Yeah? Okay, good. We were going to start with a newsreel that was shown to the conference body. 3 different news stations covered our witness and vigil event on Thursday after the business session. There were so many things happening that we were amazed that over 100 people were able to join us on that witness. And it was, so when it comes...
Says gun violence has gotten out of control in the U.S.
Yeah, they marched to City Hall to remember those lost and call for an end to the gunfire. WCPO 9 News reporter Sean Delancey was there and brings us their plan to save lives.
The people that I talked with in front of City Hall steps are not from Cincinnati, but they say that it is still unacceptable that 37 minors have been involved in shootings this year alone, more than double of this time last year.
Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
They came from all over.
I'm from Frederick, Maryland.
From coast.
It's the same in Oregon.
To coast.
We live outside of Washington, D.C. in the suburbs, and we've had enough of kids being hurt by guns, of anyone being hurt by guns.
Timothy Hollenberg Duffy is a pastor with the Church of Brethren, a nonviolence-based faith. He says when he looks at his 4-year-old daughter, Anita, and 1-year-old son, Ira, he hurts to know how many young lives are destroyed by gun violence.
It's like the simplest lesson that we're taught in Sunday school, not to hurt people.
The Church of Brethren is launching a nationwide program where its members can become gun violence prevention advocates however they want, helping with mental health crises, youth mentoring, advocating for law changes.
Get up and get active instead of being sorry. You know, we're a faith-based church. Thoughts and prayers are great, but that's not enough. We have to put feet to our prayers.
If there's a way that this rally can say to people here in Cincinnati, get involved here, that's the message that we want to get out.
This rally comes a day after one of Cincinnati's most prominent gun violence reduction advocates, Peterson Mingo, lost his great niece in a shooting. Though there's one thing these churchgoers have all learned through 300 years of its pacifist history.
No, there is no overnight solution.
It's going to take some time.
We call ourselves a Living Peace Church, and we know that that people hurt people in order to get what they want, and somebody's got to be there saying enough.
If you want to learn more about that church's initiative, we have information over at WCPO.com. At City Hall, I'm Sean Delancey, WCPO 9 News.
Thanks so much for showing that. That could say it all. I want to share personally how helpful it's been to speak from your heart, as we were talking about, out of a passion that you have. For probably a decade, I've been trying to find my voice about gun violence that just is very difficult for me to live with. And I have not been touched personally, but when a year ago On Earth Peace said that they would start this campaign, I joined along with other people. And one of the things we decided to do was we wanted to have an event at annual conference. 3 of us said we would be on the committee to do what was happening inside the conference center. This was managed by Sandy Rogers and many others, connected with people doing gun violence action in Cincinnati. So I have 4 pictures I want to show you about what happened inside the conference hall. The first one was one of 2 tables that we set up. Do you see all those scarves? Well, our congregation contributed these thanks to Corrine Spencer. How many did we have, Corrine? 160, they all disappeared. People wore them as scarves, which we intended, as headbands around their backpacks and hanging from their belts or waists. So men and women all wore them. Next picture. Oh, this also was connected to our congregation. The 20 chairs in the back represent each of them 1,000 deaths due to gun by the time conference happened this year. All the 6 chairs in front came from one of our Sunday school classrooms. And each of those represents 150 children that had been killed by the time of annual conference. Took that opportunity to put out a lot of information for people to look at. Next picture. Okay, we also created a pledge that was in print that says, as a disciple of Jesus, the Prince of Peace, I pledge to be an agent of change to end gun violence. And we were pleased that nearly 400 people signed that pledge. A number of people asked me, what does it mean to be an agent of change? So I asked them in return, what would that mean for you? And then they decided to sign it. And the final picture, I wanted to show this, anybody recognize who's in the middle there? Rhonda Pittman Gingrich. She is the director of annual conference. She really paved the way for much of this to happen. We were not in the booklet. We weren't in the plan. We said we would like a couple tables. Probably we started this in March. And she put us between registration and the exhibits. Everybody could see us. And this little quilt was something that many of the children made squares, and we put it together. And you can see Sandy Rogers. There's one that helped. On the far right is Gail Heisel. She was one of 2 members of the Laverne Church that worked with me on all of this that happened within the conference hall. And then Mandy Park, that right next to me, actually facilitates our whole Church of the Brethren Gun Violence Prevention Action Team. So the last thing we did was we gave this quilt to Rhonda in thanks for her facilitating everything that we did. So I'm not going to take time to answer questions, but I will say that hoping to pull our action following conference is to create affinity groups within our own congregations to see what we can do in our communities. So I would welcome to hear from you if you have that same kind of passion or close to it that I feel for this, and we'll get together hopefully this week sometime. I want to check out when the time would be best. So talk to me later. Thank you very much. Good time? Okay.
Let's do the video first, please.
Singing welcome to this place. You're invited to come and know God's grace. All are welcome, the love of God to share. 'Cause all of us are welcome here.
The spirit seemed good. There were God moments moving in our midst, and people seemed appreciative of the opportunity to be back together. This year's conference definitely felt more normal because we didn't need to require masks, so we were able to see not just each other's eyes, but to see each other's smiles and to greet one another more freely and to sing and to worship and to pray together in a way that just felt more natural and more free. And that really was a blessing this year.
Brethren traveled to Cincinnati for many of the traditional reasons this gathering is held every year, for an opportunity to worship together, to renew relationships, for a look at what the Church of the Brethren is doing around the world, and to make decisions about how we carry out what it means to be the Church of Jesus Christ in these times. The theme chosen by moderator Tim McElwee was Living God's Love, with text in English, Spanish, Creole, and Hausa.
Estamos viviendo el amor de Dios.
Nous vivons l'amour bon Dieu. We are living God's love.
It felt like just overall there was a loving and respectful tone among with the sharing of the delegates.
As always, conference began with worship. Music leadership was provided by Kyle Remnant from Virginia and Becca Miller from Pennsylvania on piano. Throughout the week, the multicultural nature of the Church of the Brethren was evident through worship leaders, songs, and testimonies using the 4 languages represented by the theme. Delegates convened the next morning and found their places among the tables, which has become the normal seating arrangement at annual conference. It was a relatively light business agenda this year. Most of the discussion centered on suggested wording changes for documents rather than deep theological differences. There were significant moments of celebration this year. Brethren Volunteer Service turned 75 years old.
BVS remains true to its core values, instilled by the Church of the Brethren, of sharing God's love through acts of service.
Brethren Press marked the milestone with a new book by Jim Lehman on the history of BVS.
It's one of the best things the Church of the Brethren has ever done, in my opinion. BVS is not one story. It's a story of 7,000, more than 7,000 people. So it's not possible to do a narrative history, and that's why this book is designed the way it is, with a lot of personal stories.
And throughout the week, there were reminders of another celebration, the 100th anniversary of the Church of the Brethren in Nigeria, Ecclesia Yanawa on Nigeria, or EYN, a church that has remained true to its peace stance amid horrific persecution.
Missionaries that were going to Nigeria taught us to live in peace, to practice peace, even with unbelievers. So it became part and parcel of us. It has gone down into our system that we can't do otherwise. So we've been practicing turning the other cheek, going extra mile, doing good to our enemies. Our tie with the Church of the Brethren is very, very strong.
Reminders of the huge celebration in Nigeria in March were shared several times, including with a presentation to Brethren Disaster Ministries in appreciation for the way BDM has assisted EYN's recovery efforts, just one part of the larger work of Brethren Disaster Ministries.
We are currently still working in Dawson Springs, Kentucky, doing tornado recovery from 2021. The Children's Disaster Services, we just have volunteers coming back from Guam from serving there for 3 weeks. We had gone down to one rebuilding project that we had sort of around COVID time, but this fall we're going back to having 2 because we've had enough interest from volunteers, so that's been really exciting.
Other celebrations included a welcome for 3 new worshiping communities, Madtown Church of the Brethren, recognized as a new project in Madison, Wisconsin, meeting for now as a house church, East Dayton Fellowship, ministering in a very challenging neighborhood in Dayton, Ohio, and the Gordonsville Chapel, officially recognized as a congregation. It's an offshoot from the Knights Chapel congregation in Barboursville, Virginia. Other international guests included Marcos and Sully Inhauser from the Church of the Brethren in Brazil, along with Alexander Gonçalves, who pastors a congregation in Brazil, and Athanasius Ungang from South Sudan, where a new Church of the Brethren congregation is underway. New congregations were the focus of the Brethren World Missions gathering, with news about the amazing growth of the Church of the Brethren in Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, and the Congo. Much of it supported by Chris Elliott, a pastor from Southern Pennsylvania District, who has set up a school in Rwanda to train pastors for the nearly 80 new congregations that have cropped up in that part of Africa.
We had 11 students in our first session, and so this in September, we want to begin again, and we're looking to have maybe 25 or so students for that. And they come from not only Rwanda, where the school is based, but also we've had students from Burundi and Congo as well. It's really exciting to see the enthusiasm of the people there, the evangelistic activity as they've been starting churches.
The place to go at conference to learn what's going on across the denomination was the exhibit hall, where several dozen booths were set up representing various ministries, agencies, and organizations.
The Program and Arrangements Committee was intentional about bringing traffic to the exhibit hall. The Association for the Arts was back with their quilting. Program and Arrangements Committee scheduled a coffee house stage with different performances throughout the week. We had a silent auction. Ader Financial sponsored ice cream on Tuesday evening, and Program and Arrangements Committee sponsored a game night. And so there was a lot of really good energy in the exhibit hall on Tuesday evening, but that carried out throughout the week.
Meal events provided another opportunity to learn about the church. Conference goers could hear updates from Bethany Seminary, On Earth Peace, and Ader Financial, and denominational ministries such as Brethren Press and Messenger. For a relatively new pastor to the Church of the Brethren, the women's clergy breakfast was a significant moment.
I have never seen that many women pastors before, because I was in my 40s before I ever saw a woman in a pulpit. And that was when I finally realized, yes, you can do this. Now I see all of these women who are in leadership positions, and it is amazing, and it's empowering, and it feels wonderful to be able to connect with all of these people who respect me as a woman in a pulpit. And I'm no longer being told you're not good enough.
Each business session began with a Bible study with 6 different perspectives on what it means to live God's love in the world. On Thursday, On Earth Peace organized a public witness against gun violence, an event that got the attention of the media in Cincinnati, a city racked by gun violence.
Cincinnati today to spread the word, saying it is time to put the guns down. The Church of Brethren says gun violence has gotten out of control in the U.S.
Yeah, they marched to City Hall to remember those lost and call for an end to the gunfire.
Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
They came from all over.
I'm from Frederick, Maryland.
From coast.
It's the same in Oregon.
To coast.
We live outside of Washington, D.C. in the suburbs, and we've had enough of kids being hurt by guns, of anyone being hurt by guns.
Timothy Hollenberg Duffy is a pastor with the Church of Brethren, a nonviolence-based faith. He says when he looks at his 4-year-old daughter Anita and 1-year-old son Ira, he hurts to know how many young lives are destroyed by gun violence.
It's both a witness to the city of Cincinnati to show our support for the local groups on the ground working in gun advocacy, as well as a way of getting our Church of the Brethren membership involved in this very important peace issue. We had a statement in 1978 about violence and the use of firearms, so we've been working on it for a very long time.
Raise your hand. Business items in Cincinnati reflected some of the issues facing both the church and the larger culture, among them the issue of racism. The committee assigned last year to look at ways the church can stand with people of color asked for another year to engage the church with discussion questions and to share resources on the subject. And during a business session, Chad Brennan shared with the delegates why the concept of color blindness has not been a biblically faithful approach to relating to others of different races. Many conference goers took advantage of the opportunity to visit 2 nearby museums related to the topic, trips to the Holocaust Museum and the Underground Railroad Freedom Center in downtown Cincinnati brought the issue of racial justice to the forefront for Brethren. Many conference goers took the short bus trip to witness this country's tragic experience with slavery, and one of the business items involved a statement of lament for complicity with the doctrine of discovery, part of America's history which has been used to justify the mistreatment of indigenous people in the U.S. and by many countries around the world. Delegates spent a long time working at the wording of the statement, specifically around the issue of whether and what form of reparations might be considered at some point to those who have been harmed. Eventually, delegates passed it overwhelmingly. Other business items included the creation of a study committee to explore the calling of denominational leadership, a change in the way nominations are permitted from the floor during annual conference, updates to bylaws for Ader Financial, and guidelines for pastors continuing education. There were reports from the three agencies, Bethany Seminary, On Earth Peace, and Ader Financial, updating the church on their unique ministries to the Church of the Brethren, and a video summation of the work of the Mission and Ministry Board, the primary program area of the denomination.
We walk by faith.
There was also a progress report from the study committee looking at how to make church gatherings more accessible, including exploring the option of more online participation.
We want people to be able to attend online and really enjoy that and thrive in it. How can our church best thrive in doing annual conference? How do we need to do annual conference? And if we need to change, how do we need to change? So a lot of this year has been spent on asking the tough questions.
This year's existing online arrangement was expanded somewhat.
This year we've been adding a Spanish translation to business as well. And we're continuing to expand the social media, Facebook, YouTube, and such for worship services to make it easier for more people to participate with us.
During the business sessions, several online viewers were able to forward questions or comments to the webcast team, which then shared them at the microphone. One business item coming from the Standing Committee involved a time of personal confession and repentance for the way the Church of the Brethren has engaged in hurtful dialogue during the decades-long discussion of human sexuality, the majority of it directed to LGBTQ plus members of the Church. A 5-minute time for self-reflection, prayer, and personal confession was offered for those who chose to participate.
Even though it was brief and a very modest start, it felt important for us to stop and be intentional and deliberate about naming those challenges that we've been trying to address but haven't really addressed fully, and to do so in a way that really emphasized both the importance of personal confession but also of finding a way for us to listen and love to one another well enough that we can find a way to disagree in love and really still be one body.
During Tuesday night service, moderator Tim shared his hope that we as a church could treat the issue of human sexuality much as we do other issues, where congregations have different biblical interpretation.
I think it's time to stop wrestling with this tension and instead disagree in love. Let's stop trying to resolve this decades-old dispute at the denominational level. Instead, let's allow congregations to reach their own conclusions based on their biblical interpretations of relevant scripture and on their prayerful discernment of this matter. We've followed this practice regarding military service at the congregational level. We've done so at the district level regarding the role of women in ministry. We can agree to lovingly disagree regarding matters of human sexuality at the denominational level.
Worship services were coordinated by Laura Stone, David Miller, and Don Mitchell, and featured a variety of expressions and participants from a wide spectrum of the church. Wednesday's service included the adult choir, directed by Marty Keeney. Children offered their own music at Thursday evening service, with the choir directed by Pam Hoppy. Children have spent much of their days rehearsing their chants to share with the conference. They also had a variety of activities, including bus trips to the sites in Cincinnati. Junior and senior high youth learned about Brethren-related ministries and found enjoyment just being together.
We're talking about Brethren beliefs, and it's really cool.
It's really important to learn that stuff because we just need that stuff in the world, you know?
Everyone's from the same church and has mostly the same feelings about things, so it's much easier to talk to everyone.
It gives exposure to the wider church beyond the scope of what we can see at our own communities.
Youth also did service projects for the community one day, and the whole conference offered a gift to the host city, bringing crates of supplies for Found House, an agency that helps struggling families in Cincinnati.
Thank you.
Other examples of Brethren generosity included the auctioning of quilts and wall hangings by the Association for the Arts, which raised $3,700 for the Nigeria Crisis Fund. In addition, Brethren donated 120 pints of blood for the local Cincinnati Blood Bank. And almost $13,000 was raised by a silent auction in the exhibit hall, all from the sale of donated items. Those funds will be split between the annual conference budget and Brethren Disaster Ministries. Annual conference is designed to unite, strengthen, and equip the members of the Church of the Brethren to better follow Jesus. The week in Cincinnati was filled with opportunities to do that. But the focus of each day remained the worship services, a time to sing together, pray together, and discern the Church of the Brethren's calling as followers of Christ.
Stay connected to the vine so that you may continually bear fruit, the fruit of God's love. Keep on loving God and keep on loving people.
On Thursday evening, Deanna Brown asked her audience to share the challenges faced by the Good Samaritan in the Gospel of Luke.
There may not be a future for our children or our planet unless we all claim and live this parable of going near. And when we do, our hearts may just open in compelling, risky, Christ-like, joyful compassion. May it be so.
Friday's preacher, California pastor Jody Romero, urged brethren to reach out beyond themselves.
We are proclaiming Jesus. Acts chapter 1 verse 8 says this, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere, in Jerusalem, throughout Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." Friends, Jerusalem starts where you are. Judea is throwing your net on the other side of the pond. Samaria is the place and those people that you don't want to go to. And the ends of the earth, well, they're still waiting for us. Jesus paid a significant price so that all would receive peace and salvation. And friends, I believe with my whole heart that Jesus wants what he paid for.
Saturday morning's closing service included bread and cup communion and a sermon by Audrey Svay, whose grandmother Harriet Finney was moderator in 2003 and who was pictured on the cover of Messenger that year with a quote saying someday she wants to be moderator, just like her grandmother. Now, 20 years later, a pastor in Indiana, a grown-up Audrey, challenged brethren to talk honestly about differences.
We cannot keep playing tug of war. We need to find the holy center to our complex Venn diagram, where everyone can be seen. We may find that is where God has been all along.
Saturday's service included the consecration of the new moderator, Madeline Metzger from Indiana, and moderator-elect Dava Hensley, a pastor from Virginia, who will serve at the 2025 annual conference. After which moderator Madeline shared the 2024 theme, Welcome and Worthy, based on Paul's letter to the church in Rome, in which he introduces Phoebe and tells the Roman Christians to welcome her in the Lord in a way that is worthy of God's people. This year's gathering in Cincinnati, in the words of moderator Tim McElwee, involved tackling some of the complex challenges facing the church, but having done so with respect and determination.
Oh, the thing that's always so enjoyable, we can be together. We can see friends. We can hug. We can just share laughter and joy. And that's a treasure from annual conference.
Oh, it's always good to see old friends, and gives me a chance to catch up with my dad and brother who don't live in the same state anymore.
The attentiveness with which the people at my table, and I'm sure other tables, focused on the issues and dealt with love and care and consideration and respect, that was heartening.
He liked it this time. They all were together and we understand each other and to be in community. So we will be more close to the Church of the Brethren.
The most enjoyable thing for me is meeting people from all over the country, and even those who came from
other countries and just getting to know one another and the fellowship. It's a beautiful thing to really experience that and upholding one another in God's love.
We spoke about, and I think we tried to live out the conviction that we should both speak the truth in love as well as listen in love. And it felt to me like the delegate body and all who attended annual conference really were trying to live God's love.
Well, as always, David Sollenberger and his team do a great job of summing up annual conference. So there's a lot of things I don't need to say because you just heard so much of that. First of all, I want to thank all of you for sending Bob and I as your delegates. I'm sorry he can't be with us here today, but we appreciated being able to go and be delegates for all of you. So thank you. A few things of note, as many of you have been to annual conference before, Bob and I wanted to point out a few things that were different this year. The silent auction held in the exhibit hall was something new and different. The racial justice workshop that was built into worship, that felt like something new, taking dedicated time out of business to work and learn together. And then the Church of the Brethren accepted a sponsor for the first time. And so there was kind of a marketing presentation from the sponsor, which is Logos, which does Bible study software. So you may have heard things about that as well. A few key favorite things that Bob and I wanted to share with you that we appreciated. Bob said especially Ruth Ann Neckel Johansson's Bible study about Japanese linked poetry, which I would agree with. That was a very moving session. He also appreciated Jennifer Keeney Scar's biblical storytelling that was at the Messenger and Brethren Press dinner, and Audrey Svei's Saturday morning sermon. If you didn't listen to or watch or participate in all of the worship services, I would encourage you. They are available for you to go out and participate in and take in. The worship services were all very meaningful. A few things I really appreciated in the opening worship, starting out with 4 women on stage sharing in their languages, was just really meaningful to me, right? The history of the Church of the Brethren, we don't always see women up there in leadership. Our church is blessed, we have that in spades, but not every church experiences that. Not every woman has experienced that, and that was a very powerful start for me. The music, the variety of music and singing throughout conference is always a blessing and wonderful. And the fact that the theme song had all 4 languages incorporated in it, and we were singing that day after day, really drove home the multicultural aspect of our church that, again, in the Midwest or in our small rural churches, we don't always remember and feel connected to how multicultural our church denomination truly is. One of the equipping sessions that I attended that I really enjoyed was the Soil and the Seed project with the Walking Roots Band, which is a Mennonite band that had come and presented. The Soil and the Seed project is a liturgical-based devotional series that incorporates music into all of their messages. And that was just really interesting to hear about how that came to be, how it was just this idea of, would creating something that would go to 300 families be worth your time? And the leadership in the Mennonite church said, yes, of course. And it has vastly outgrown that. It's connected with thousands of people. And that was just really inspiring to hear how, this little idea, this little seed, took off and grew. I also appreciated being able to attend the Manchester Alumni Luncheon. Our new president, Stacy, was there, and so it was nice to be able to meet her and hear her vision for the future of Manchester University. And so that was a nice time as well. Another thing Bob did want me to mention, coming out of the business items, the report from Standing with People of Color did come with some nice handouts for discussion groups or Sunday school classes. So if your groups are interested in resources for that, we can make sure that you get connected to those. Those are my comments at this time. I'm going to pass it over to Tim, and then we'll do questions at the end.
Thanks, Catherine, and for everybody being here. We don't have a whole lot of time, so I'll try to be as quick as I can. So Amy said just to think a little bit about not just annual conference, but of this these last couple of years, first as moderator-elect and then as moderator. And I have to say I can't resist one more reference to that passage of scripture that both Laura and Kurt felt compelled to share with us 2 Sundays in a row, because the overriding feeling I had when this surprise call came about was a whole lot of serious self-doubts that I was up to what the church was calling me to do. And all of you, in one way or another, helped me with that. Kurt, on many occasions when we talked, in one way or another said, what you bring to this is enough, even though inside it never felt like enough. So I wanted to say a word of gratitude for all the ways that all of you helped me feel, despite my hesitations and self-doubts, that I could move forward in this work. A few I bent your ear more often than others. Jim Chenworth endured many a long, agonizing session with me, and Debbie and Linda more than anybody, and she's still willing to be married to me despite all of that. The other thing I would say real quickly is, and I don't know how other moderators have managed without this, but I quickly realized, probably out of my experience as a member of this church, that how desperately I need to hear from others, both to hold me accountable and also to help me discern how to move forward. So I organized a group I called a discernment group. And you know many of those people, Kurt Borgman, Bob Neff, former general secretary, former president at Juniata, Bob Johansson, and Ruth Ann Knuckle Johansson, and Kim McDowell, who's a pastor retired now from Maryland, and Carol Weiss. So those sisters and brothers and I met at least once a month, sometimes more often than that, just through Zoom, and it was just absolutely invaluable to me throughout these 2 years. So the other thing I would say is the honor of representing the church at the EYN Centennial was just an enormous, wonderful experience that I will forever be grateful for. And to be able to be at annual conference so that the whole church could be a part of those celebrations was just another tremendous experience. The last thing I want to say is that, there was reference to that sermon in the video, and I really do think it was more of a presentation, really, than a sermon. I did have a sermon prepared. We have to prepare them and submit them 2 weeks before annual conference, so the translators and those doing the audiovisual have them. People like Laura have them. Laura, I had the pleasure of working with, who put all that worship material together for my sermon that night, organized those 4 women that Catherine pointed out to share in that worship. Anyway, I had a sermon, but I provided this, at standing committee, the moderators asked to share some observations. And I provided these observations. And after that presentation, 8 members of standing committee, and there are 24 of them, from a wide variety of theological perspectives, came up to me and said, you got to share that message with the church. And I said, I don't have any opportunity to do that. The agenda is packed. There's no way for me to do that. So Linda will recall Monday night, I provided the presentation on Tuesday. Monday night late, I was sitting around thinking about that, and I said, I've got this wacky idea, and I don't know what to do with it. So at 10 p.m., I called Kurt Borgman and said, this is what I feel led to do. Set the sermon aside and share these reflections. And Kurt said, you know, we always say we're supposed to follow the leadings of the Spirit. If you're not going to follow the leadings of the Spirit now, when are you going to do that? And just sort of put it right back on my lap. So I was just talking with Jeanette a little earlier, I don't know where Jeanette is now, the decision felt more like surrendering than it did a deliberate, intentional decision. Like I really could do no other than what it seemed I was being called to do. So I don't know, I'll never know whether that was the right decision. One of the lessons of being moderator is that it's a lot like parenting, and that there's more guesswork than any of us would have imagined when we started down that pathway. But what I was really asking the church to consider, that is to entrust the denominations, to trust the congregations, rather than make a decision at the denominational level on questions related to how we accept, embrace, and fully love those who identify as LGBTQ. It feels like such a baby step to me to ask that we allow our congregations to make that decision. I wouldn't make that argument about whether or not the denomination ought to let congregations decide if ethnic minorities are equal to us. The denomination ought to affirm that. And in my biased opinion, the denomination ought to also affirm our sisters and brothers who identify as LGBTQ are as equal and worthy as any of the rest of us as we sit around the table together. So it feels like a very small step to ask us to do that as a church, but my hope is that maybe more congregations like ours over time may be willing to delve into some of those important biblical passages, make that decision as a congregation, and maybe one by one, more and more will join this Supportive Communities Network, and maybe one fine day, maybe we as a denomination will be there. So anyway, that's what I thought I'd share and give it back to Amy.
We have time for one question. All right, Nan, you're it.
Thank you so much. Tim, I'm wondering if you have received any feedback, any negative blowback, since I was part of one person doing that after the lament on Friday morning. And I'm just wondering what you've received.
Is this one on too, Randy? I have, over the course of these last couple of years, received a lot of emails. And I want to say that the vast majority of them have been critical, but I've also received some loving comments as well. On that particular issue, we did have the one brother who felt led to stand and speak in opposition to the time of confession and repentance. But I didn't receive and haven't received any emails or any other comments about that from the time. So we can all, I guess, just try our best to interpret what that means. But yeah.
As we watched the wrap-up video, I was struck by how many people showed up on the screen that are connected to this congregation currently or had been raised. And so thank you for being the congregation you have been and will be, for moving this denomination in compassionate ways. Thank you. And thank you, Catherine and Bev and Tim and Bob, for your service. Have a lovely Sunday afternoon. And thanks to Randy. Yeah.